At 92 years old, Willie Nelson has lived a life full of triumphs, heartaches, and struggles that most people couldn't imagine surviving. He's buried friends, lost fortunes, and watched his dreams burn to the ground. Yet, in what might be his final moments, he's revealing something that shocks everyone who hears it. "What are you looking at me for? I ain't got nothing to say." Willie's response to life's most profound question about death cuts through decades of pretense with brutal honesty. And it's this raw truth, born from a lifetime of unimaginable pain, crushing defeats and losses that would break lesser men, that has shaped the legend we know today. At 92 years old, Willie Nelson has seen more heartbreak than most people could survive. He's buried friends, lost fortunes, and watched his dreams burn to ashes. In what could be his final moments, he's revealing something that shocks everyone who hears it. "What are you looking at me for? I ain't got nothing to say," he says. When asked about death, Willie doesn't flinch. His response cuts through decades of pretense with brutal honesty. Low points? When I lost my son, that was a big one. Everything else seems to pale in comparison. But what led this legendary outlaw to such stark acceptance of his own mortality? What made him embrace it with such unflinching clarity? The answer lies buried deep in a lifetime of unimaginable pain. A story filled with crushing defeats, struggles that most would have crumbled under, and losses that left scars deeper than anyone could imagine. We're about to hear the raw truth about what happens when life strips away everything you thought mattered. The journey to this moment of clarity began long before Willie became a household name. It all started in the dust and desperation of Depression-era Texas, where a young boy named Willie Hugh Nelson learned his first brutal lesson about abandonment. Willie was born on April 29, 1933 in Abbott, Texas, to parents Merle and Ira Nelson. But from his earliest memories, the world seemed determined to teach him that nothing lasts forever. And one of the first lessons in his life came with abandonment. His mother, after promising to return when times got better, left when Willie was just 6 years old, leaving him and his sister Bobby with their grandparents. The better times never came, and his father remarried, starting a new life. Willie was left to wonder what he'd done wrong, why he wasn't worth staying for. This abandonment cut deep, and the wound would never fully heal. Even the love of his grandparents, William and Nancy Smothers, who gave him his first guitar at 6 and taught him music, couldn't erase the haunting question. Why wasn't he enough to make his parents stay? Willie's early life was filled with harsh lessons, like picking cotton in the scorching Texas summers alongside migrant workers. His small hands bled under the merciless sun. It was backbreaking work, devastating for a grown man, but brutal for a child. But it taught him endurance, how to push through pain when giving up seemed easier. The work was grueling, but it was here in the fields that Willie began to find solace in music. He wrote his first song at age 7, a simple, crude attempt at expressing feelings he couldn't say with words. At 10, he joined his first band, the Bohemian Pula, and found something powerful on stage: acceptance. The crowd didn't abandon him, they wanted him there. But even as music became his refuge, the scars of abandonment remained. Willie Nelson learned early that people leave. Promises break. And counting on anyone but yourself is dangerous. These hard lessons served him well in the music industry, but they also taught him something few people grasp. Attachment to anything, even life itself, can become a prison. Willie's resilience was born from having nothing left to lose, a hard-earned understanding that would guide him through life's toughest battles. By the early 1960s, Willie Nelson thought he had found love. He married Martha Matthews, and together they built what seemed like a perfect life. 3 beautiful children, Lana, Susie, and Billy, who filled their home with laughter. Willie chased his dream in Nashville, the heart of country music, writing songs that would later become classics. But while his songs were being recorded by major stars like Patsy Cline, Willie struggled to make ends meet. He worked odd jobs, sold encyclopedias door to door, pumped gas, did whatever he could to keep food on the table. The man who would become a multimillionaire was sleeping on friends' couches, counting pennies for groceries. Martha grew tired of the constant struggle. She'd married a dreamer, but reality was a house with empty cupboards and overdue bills. The fights began small but grew louder, meaner, and more frequent. Willie would return from another failed audition to find Martha's resentment waiting for him, like a loaded gun. The pressure began to crush something deep inside him. The man who would become a multi-millionaire was sleeping on friends' couches, counting pennies for groceries. Martha grew tired of the constant struggle. She'd married a dreamer, but reality was a house with empty cupboards and overdue bills. The fights began small but grew louder, meaner, and more frequent. Willie would return from another failed audition to find Martha's resentment waiting for him, like a loaded gun. The pressure began to crush something deep inside him. He started drinking heavily, drowning his failures in whiskey and self-pity. Martha's disappointment became a mirror, reflecting everything he had failed to become. The man who could write songs that made millions cry couldn't figure out how to make his own wife smile. One particularly brutal winter night, Willie hit rock bottom. The rejection letters piled up. The bills were overdue, and Martha's harsh words cut deeper than any knife. In his darkest moment, he made a decision that would haunt him for years. He walked into the freezing Nashville streets, so drunk he could barely stand. He laid down in the street, hoping a car would end his pain. The cold asphalt against his back felt like ice as he closed his eyes, waiting for headlights to bring him the peace he craved. But cars swerved around him, drivers shouting curses. But none delivered the relief he desperately sought. He lay there for what felt like hours, understanding that sometimes the most desperate act is also the most cowardly. When he finally dragged himself home, Martha was waiting. But instead of comfort, she offered ultimatums. Instead of understanding, she gave him lists of his failures. The marriage, for all intents and purposes, was over. Willie learned another brutal lesson, that even love could become a weapon. The people closest to you can inflict the deepest wounds, and sometimes no amount of love can heal the damage done. December 25th, 1991 should have been a day of celebration for the Nelson family. Christmas morning, presents under the tree, grandchildren running through the house with new toys. But instead, it became the day that would haunt Willie Nelson for the rest of his life. Billy Nelson, Willie's eldest son, had been struggling for years, fighting a battle with depression that fame could never touch. Being Willie Nelson's son in Texas was like carrying a weight that grew heavier each day. People expected Billy to be a reflection of his famous father, to have the charm, the talent, the easy smile that made Willie a star. But Billy didn't have his father's ability to transform pain into art. He was broken in ways that no amount of fame could fix. Despite therapy and medication, the weight of expectations grew unbearable. Billy's decision to end his own life on Christmas Day shocked Willie to the core. His son, the boy who had carried his name and his hopes, was gone. And Willie was left to mourn a loss so profound that nothing could prepare him for it. The funeral was a nightmare of whispered conversations and careful silences. Everyone talked about Billy's struggles, about the pressure of being Willie Nelson's son. But Willie sat through it all in stunned silence, replaying every conversation, every missed opportunity to say the right thing. Willie's reflection on Billy's death taught him something terrifying about the nature of suffering. He learned that some pain doesn't make you stronger. It just makes you different. Some losses don't heal. They become part of who you are. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is understanding why someone might choose to leave. While Willie was still reeling from this tragedy, another storm quietly began to build in his life. His business managers had made decisions that would eventually destroy everything he'd worked for. In 1990, just 1 year before Billy's death, the IRS came knocking. The number was staggering: $32 million in unpaid taxes. Willie's business managers had failed to pay the government what was owed, investing in questionable schemes and mishandling his finances. The seizure was swift and merciless. They took everything: gold records, his piano, his beloved ranch in Texas. Even his personal belongings were seized. Friends and advisors urged Willie to declare bankruptcy. It would be the smart business decision, the legal way to escape his debt. But Willie refused. He said he'd never do a bankruptcy where the people he owed would be screwed out of their money. Instead, he chose the harder path. He would pay every penny, no matter how long it took. He released an album called The IRS Tapes: Who Will Buy My Memories, with all proceeds going directly to the government. He auctioned off his possessions, watching strangers bid on the artifacts of his career. Willie toured relentlessly, playing small venues and county fairs. accepting any gig to chip away at the debt. Through sheer determination, Willie eventually paid off the $32 million tax bill. The experience left him with a profound understanding of attachment and material wealth. He learned that losing everything doesn't kill you. It just shows you what really matters. The music, the love, the connections that endure. As Willie Nelson's story unfolded, his voice became a beacon of authenticity in a world full of pretenders. He took controversial stands that cost him fans, but he refused to be anyone but himself. In the late 1960s, during a time of intense racial tension, Willie did something shocking. At EOS, a concert in Texas, he kissed black country singer Charlie Pride on the lips. It was a defiant act, a challenge to the racism that plagued country music. The backlash was swift, but Willie stood his ground. Willie's activism became even more pronounced as he aged. He spoke out for peace, for the underdog, and for those who couldn't speak for themselves. He endorsed liberal candidates, played benefit concerts, and used his music to spread messages of social justice. In 2006, he recorded a controversial song about gay cowboys, and in 2018, he released Vote Them Out, urging Americans to use their power at the polls. The song divided his fan base, but Willie didn't care. He would rather be honest and hated than popular and fake. Willie Nelson's battle with his lungs began even before his famous marijuana use became legendary. He collapsed a lung in 1981 during a vacation in Maui, and years of smoking, both cigarettes and marijuana, took a toll on his health. By 2015, Willie was so ill that he had to undergo stem cell surgery to try to repair his damaged lungs. The road to recovery was long, but Willie's natural toughness helped him pull through. Then came COVID-19. At nearly 90 years old, Willie was faced with a deadly virus that could have been a death sentence. His wife, Annie D'Angelo, sprang into action, providing constant care as Willie's life hung in the balance. Miraculously, Willie survived, but the experience left him profoundly changed. He had come face to face with his own mortality, and in that confrontation, he learned something crucial. Dying isn't as dramatic as we imagine. It's just another part of the journey. Willie Nelson has lived a life full of love, loss, and the acceptance of mortality. His reflections on death, his friends, and his legacy have taught us all something profound. He's learned that living fully means accepting the inevitable end. And when that time comes, it's just another transition. He's spent decades creating music that will outlive him, touching lives across generations. And now, as the last of the highwaymen, Willie understands that being the last one standing isn't a victory, it's a burden. But it's a burden he carries with grace.